The sound of clapping echoed throughout the room as the pressure reached its peak. Ryuk turned his attention toward the source of the clapping, finding a man standing at the top of the floor from which they had all descended. He was a snow-white-haired figure like Ryuk, young but not at their level. He appeared to be around 27 to 30 years of age and wore the instructor uniform. An interesting smirk currently rested on his lips as he observed the confrontation before slowly falling forward toward the ground. He landed softly, walking toward the three of them. A human standing in challenge before a vampire and a werewolf. It's not every day you see such bravery. That only makes my choice even more worth it. The man mused aloud. Ryuk slowly deactivated Nano Reaper and quelled his frost aura, returning to his normal weak-looking state. Now that an instructor was here, continuing to fight would be to ignore his presence, a direct provocation on its own. So he might as well let things rest for now. Good, the man said at Ryuk's action, arriving directly before him. I am Mad White, and I want to have a word with you now, he said before turning back. Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed slightly, but he obliged. Giving one last stare at Fenrir, he uttered, "The barest minimum for a friendship with me is equality. I see no sense in trying to be friends with someone who considers themselves above me. And while you might not see me as prey, it's clear that you also do not consider me someone to be placed on equal footing with you. So we can't be friends, Fenrir." Ryuk's cold voice echoed through the area, slamming into Fenrir's ears, whose eyes gleamed with deep red light. He had truly tried to form a bond with Ryuk, yet he was refused so coldly. Such disrespect was something he had never experienced before. "And just for the record, you're not stronger than I am. And neither are you, arrogant vampire." Those were his last words before he followed after Mad White's figure. The sound of bones crackling together rang out in the room as Sanguine and Fenrir clenched their fists tightly. "Tch, an ignorant human talking so big. Let's see how long you keep that up," Sanguine said in disdain. He huffed and turned away from the training room, leaving only Fenrir staring at the spot where Ryuk had left. Then he suddenly smiled. His hands morphed into gigantic dark claws with nails of steel, which he raised to his face. "It's been quite a long time since my will was refused, and I had thought he would have made for a good human slave. I guess I'll just have to do it the werewolf way then." "Don't tell me you're really planning on taking on the strongest werewolf and vampire in your newcomer hierarchy at the same time? Or did you know I was around and would stop the fight before it happened?" The voice of Instructor Mad White echoed through the elevator where he and Ryuk stood. Ryuk looked at the man, studying his handsome features for a while, particularly drawn to his strange blue eyes, before turning his gaze away to the elevator wall. "I lost myself to anger," he replied. The man's eyebrows furrowed for a moment before he chuckled. "Then it's a good thing I came in early, huh?" he said with a loud laugh. Ryuk chuckled too, and then, "ing." The sound of a chime echoed as the elevator doors opened, and both of them stepped out. Ryuk took in his surroundings, finding it to be a balcony at the very top of one of the tallest skyscrapers in the area. There were a couple of sofas, a glass table, a mug of coffee, which was surprisingly still steaming as if someone had just warmed it up, and 2 glasses of an unfamiliar drink. "Come. Settle down," the man ushered as he walked to the sofa and took his seat, with Ryuk sitting opposite him. Relaxed, he poured the blue drink into both cups before settling down on the large sofa and taking a long sip. "Thank you," Ryuk said as he picked up the cup, but in his mind, "Can you sense any foreign dangerous material within? System? None found. Host. Good," Ryuk thought as he took a sip. The drink had quite a bitter taste, but he was already used to Uncle BB's bitter teas, so he easily endured it and placed the cup down. But then, Ryuk's face suddenly changed massively as he felt an incredibly hot lava-like sensation flowing through his throat, and then, goo! A loud belch left his lips uncontrollably as flames burst out, flying all around the area. Another loud laugh erupted from Mad White's lips. "How do you like it, Ryuk? Good. No? Ha ha ha. Cough. Cough." A coughing fit erupted from Ryuk's lips as steam continuously escaped his lungs. He had no choice but to direct frost energy to his mouth, causing a painful sizzling sound that he endured with clenched eyes. After about 30 seconds, the hot sensation finally faded away, replaced by cold air escaping Ryuk's lips. He turned to look at Instructor Madwhite but found him taking repeated sips of the drink, without a single change in expression. It was clear they had drunk the same thing, yet while Ryuk had his throat burned up, Madwhite seemed to be enjoying it. "A good drink, actually," Ryuk muttered. "Did well in reminding me. I'm still pretty weak compared to an instructor." Madwhite chuckled. "You actually didn't do that bad, though. I've seen some people have their throats burned off completely and spend weeks in the hospital. Your lungs are surprisingly more durable than normal? Or is it your frost energy that is purer?" the man asked with a surprised expression. Ryuk was rendered speechless. Then he put his cup down and decided to get real, but was paused when Madwhite raised his hand. "I already know," the man said to him as he placed down his cup and rose to his feet before moving to the balcony of the roof. Ryuk naturally followed after him, and from this point one could easily see the entire academy below, even the second-year area. "I've been watching you, Ryuk, ever since you stepped forth before the Ascension Academy grassland and prepared for the hierarchy tests. But you only truly caught my attention during the hierarchy test itself. I've watched your battles, and I have to say you're quite talented for a human." "I am?" Ryuk asked, bewildered. "Are humans really that weak?" "Just so you know, the next human in the ranking is placed at 205. The man said with a smile as Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed. "Rank 205? Even if it made sense that a human couldn't be in the top 100 rankings, because they belong solely to the members of the 10 families, there was still the 101 to 200 range. Yet, a human couldn't even get into that spot, ending up in the third 100th row at rank 205. That was truly ridiculous. And just so you know, that human is referred to as quite the genius in the human world. He's very popular. Yet compared to the other races, do you see how low in the ranking he is? But then there is you ranking in the top 10 itself. That should be enough to catch the attention of a fellow human instructor, shouldn't it?" the man said with a small smile, and Ryuk nodded. Now it makes sense why the man had recognized him here. It would really be hard for them not to notice. "I have been following after you ever since you left your dorm room for the training room." Madwhite continued, drawing his attention. "But I purposefully didn't interfere with your interaction between you and Fenrir. I wanted you to see the reality of it, how these other races really view humans. As for Sanguine's entrance, that was pure coincidence too, and one I didn't stop because it should allow you to see even more. Tell me, what can you say about both of them?" Madwhite asked as Ryuk's eyebrow furrowed, and he replied, "They see themselves as above humans. They both do. Fenrir might argue that he doesn't see me as prey, but the fact that he referred to me as human, instead of calling me by my name when Sanguine entered, showed how he really viewed me. Unworthy of even being called by my own human name and instead slamming my race name on me." Ryuk mused to himself. He had thought Fenrir was a cool guy, but when Sanguine entered, he had seen how his character had changed. How he started referring to him as human instead of using his name. He could sense in his eyes that he really didn't consider Ryuk as an equal. He might say Ryuk wasn't prey, but that was just sugarcoating it. His true perception of him was clear, and that was why Ryuk had turned his blade toward him along with Sanguine. They both were the same thing. Just so you know, this isn't just a special characteristic attributed only to the wolves and the vampires. 99% of Endurtha's other races look down on humans and don't consider them on equal footing, especially the top 10 strongest races. Their treatment is the worst. But they are right. During the Dark Era, we humans were truly their most favored snacks. We were mainly slaves for them or food for them. If not for the appearance of the Nulls, we would have still been the same slave race today. So somehow, the Nulls' appearance can be considered humanity's help from God, as it made the boss races pay less attention to us, and in return, gave us time to experiment with apex energy and grow our strength. When they had their attention on us, They wanted us to become cannon fodder in the war, to be pushed to the front and die first. But then, we had become strong enough. Not that if an all-out war broke out between humans and them we wouldn't be losing, we would be wiped out for sure, but we had built so much destructive power that 50% of the races on End-Earth would be wiped from the surface if the humans unleashed their ultimate artifact. It was partially what called for the truce. Instructor Madwhite recited as Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed. That wasn't the story he had really heard from the books. The nulls and mutated beasts are getting more active these days, and more dimensional gates are opening up. Things are getting more chaotic. In these peaceful era, we humans are rapidly developing, but compared to the rest of the races, we're still not much. We need powerhouses, human beings who can strike fear into their hearts. Once war breaks out, the race at the weakest end of the food chain will suffer the greatest injuries. I am afraid that if there is any race that will be wiped out, we humans will be among the first. That is why, right now, my eyes are on raising a powerful human genius. One whose heart has not yet yielded to the thought of other races being above us eternally. Because, truly, humans are quick to give up. The majority of humans have chosen to be slaves rather than fight back. During these peaceful eras, they are getting cozy with the other races, not knowing that if the nulls disappear one day, then the dark era will once more encroach upon us. So, the human race needs not just a human talented enough to be powerful. We also need one whose heart is still flaming with pride in being a human. Your action to instantly turn your eyes toward not only Sanguine but even Fenrir himself, quickly finding out his facade and not being afraid or bowing to him. It really won my heart, Ryuk. It moved me. And just so you know, not much can move me these days. Madwhite had always had his eyes on Ryuk. From when the boy had first appeared in the hierarchy test, he had been drawn to him like a moth to a flame. He had seen his abilities, ones which he felt wouldn't actually pale in comparison to any of the top 10 family geniuses. One might see it as just Ryuk being just another genius, but Madwhite was no fool. No human genius ever had any hopes of matching the geniuses from the top 10 families, and he knew well that one such as Ryuk was incredibly rare. And to top it all off, Ryuk was unknown. The most talented human geniuses are very well known throughout the human world, and even the top 10 families, but even with all his power, he had only managed to rank 205. Ryuk was the special anomaly, and with nobody knowing him or him having much fame compared to the top 10 family geniuses, he was the perfect hidden powerhouse to raise. He couldn't watch Ryuk living a mundane life and going at the training pace of the other students. For one as talented as he was, that would be a waste, and that was why Madwhite had made up his mind about it. Instructors like me aren't regular instructors that teach students topics and all that. We are referred to as guardian instructors, and our job? To defend the academy from external threats and sometimes also take on sudden Lord-level missions that might be a threat to End-Earth. But one more thing that we are allowed to do is take a student under our wings and become their personal mentor. This will be like the student having a personal teacher. One that watches over their training and also provides guidance or even direct training to our intern. There are 10 guardian instructors, and I am sure they will soon begin approaching the various other highly ranked geniuses. Most of them are from the top 10 families, so it's just the perfect combination for them. And I'm a human. That's partly the reason why I decided to choose you, a human. So I brought you here today to ask if you'll become my personal intern. The man said, finally getting to the core reason why he was here. Ryuk stared into the distance for a long while, remaining silent as he calmly thought through the man's words before he finally asked, if there was never a human amongst the top 10 families, would you have chosen an intern at all? Let's say I was ranked 204, and there was no human at all above that rank of mine. Would you have chosen one from the top 10 family geniuses or, say, one from the top 10 hierarchy as a personal intern? Ryuk asked, and he got his reply pretty quickly. I wouldn't. The newcomers test happens every year, right? And the guardian instructors choose geniuses to train every year when they arrive. You've obviously been here for more than a year. So you mean to tell me you've never chosen any genius at all for these past few years while the other guardians were choosing one? Or was there a human that once caught your eye before? Ryuk asked, and Mad White chuckled. None has. There were some human geniuses that even eventually ranked top 105. But still, they couldn't enter my eyes. Most had their wills crumbled to nothing by the top 10 family geniuses. And even when their potential stated they were truly talented, it doesn't mean much with such low will. You're the first genius I, Mad White, will be taking in. Feeling prideful? Huh? He said, nudging Ryuk, who surprisingly had a serious expression on his face. You don't fancy the top 10 families. To be plain, you hate them. Ryuk called, and Mad White paused his laugh. Their existence disgusts you so much that, for years, you refused to take in one of their geniuses and tutor them. And even when human geniuses who are talented appear, you still refuse to take them in once they bow to the top 10 families. This shows how much hatred you have for the top 10 families. You want to raise a genius, one who has no fear of the top 10 families and is talented enough. I seem to fit these marks, and that is why you want to tutor me. For the bigger reason of there being a powerhouse who can stand against the top 10 families in times of humanity's doom, which you believe will be happening soon. In short, you want to raise a hero, Ryuk called, and not a single one of his words was wrong to Mad White. One could say that right now, Mad White was one of the strongest human powerhouses, and with his position in the Ascension Academy, he could see that humanity's future wasn't looking too good. For that, he wanted to raise a hero, one who could change humanity's path to one more favorable. That was his goal, to raise a hero. I will never be a hero, Ryuk replied, ending Mad White's thoughts. I do not have that much charisma or loyalty to the human race as you do, nor do I hate the top 10 families. In fact, I owe 2 of the families a favor already, and there have been those who have helped me amongst the top 10 families. I am neutral about the others. Just because I have skirmishes with Sanguine and Fenrir doesn't mean I now hate the werewolf and vampiro families. And I like to do things my way, not forced by a false sense of righteousness or whatever. I react to situations as I see fit. When I was weaker, I allowed people to walk over me and order me around, understanding my own weakness, and mostly keeping silence. I let them treat me like trash, only fighting back when they reached a level where I couldn't take it for my pride. But then, when I grew stronger, my boldness increased, and I began striking back. I start setting the boundaries. But still, if tomorrow, an advanced race of interdimensional appeared out of nowhere and started killing everybody who refused to bow their heads to them, if they were strong enough to subjugate the entirety of Enderath, I would be the first to bow to them and swear fealty. Ryuk called as Mad White's eyes narrowed. So you understand now. I'm not really as heroic as you think. I am a survivor, and if I have to be a coward or abandon my own race to survive, I will do that without thinking twice. Ryuk's words were cold and dead straight to the point, creating hundreds of questions and doubts in Mad White's head. He had seen Ryuk's action in standing against Fenrir and Sanguine and had been moved by his bravery, further making him seem a potential fit for his plan. But now, when he said he would abandon the human race in a heartbeat and had not that much hatred for the top 10 families, it created doubt in his mind. Why do I feel like you didn't stand up to Fenrir and Sanguine just because of losing yourself to anger? Mad White suddenly asked, looking into his dual-colored eyes as Ryuk smirked. Losing myself to anger? That was partly the reason, but I'm a survivor, and up until now, I should know better than to let anger overtake me. The only reason why I dared to face both Fenrir and Sanguine was because I was confident in being able to defeat them both. I don't act foolishly due to anger unless I am sure there's a possibility of winning, he replied, and Mad White chuckled. So you really thought you could take on the most powerful vampire and the most powerful werewolf at the same time? He asked with mocking laughter, but looking at Ryuk's face, he saw not the slightest doubt or jest at all. It will be hard to defeat them, but if all hell breaks out for real, I can just kill them. But then that might end up with me being killed too, so I'll only do that if there really is no choice. He replied with furrowed eyebrows as Mad White's eyes flashed. Is killing someone easier to you compared to defeating them? He asked, earning a nod from Ryuk. It is. In what way? Mad White asked curiously. To defeat a mutated beast. That's hard, as you'll have to beat them until they can no longer stand. And you also fight with their will, trying to break it down, and also deal enough damage to their body such that it works no longer to their will. So much complications. But to kill a mutated beast, you only need to take away its life. That is very much easier than trying to grind away continuously at their will for battle, he replied, something that made Mad White's blue eyes flash, a bit of surprise in them. Just how the hell was he raised up? And truthfully, Ryuk thought killing someone was much easier than defeating them. During his battle with Ignatius, there were more than thousands of times he could have killed him off. Instead of cutting off Ignatius's arms, he could have easily reached for his neck and slashed it off. Instead of eventually using King's aura to grind away at Ignatius's remaining will, he could have easily pierced through his head and ended him for good. One had to know he had been killing since he was 10 years old up until he was 16, never failing a single day. Uncle Bob never made Ryuk leave something alive. He had trained Ryuk to kill as fast as possible, but when Ryuk had arrived at grade B, he had noticed killing was somehow frowned upon, and instead, defeating seemed to be the one that people really loved. That had forced him into situations where he had to constantly focus on not killing and instead trying to subjugate people, prompting him to use much force on them while also keeping conscious of the fact that he couldn't kill them. Now, that was something hard for Ryuk. He had no idea how powerful Sanguine or Fenrir was, but he knew well they were still at his level. If he used his Umbral Reaper along with all he had, going absolutely all out from the beginning, he knew he would force them to their knees eventually. But if he was instructed to kill them both, he wouldn't even need Umbral Reaper at all. He would only need his scythe. So, for Ryuk, to kill a person was easier than to defeat them. I know well you came under the banner of the fallen family. I expect they just have helped you in some way for you to come in through their turf. And I don't expect every human to have the same hatred that I do for the top 10 families, nor the same loyalty as I do to the human race. Mad White began with a serious expression on his face as Ryuk turned his attention to him. But it is undoubtable. Like it or not, Ryuk, you're the most built to be a hero. Many in your shoes, during what you did to Fenrir and Sanguine, would have chosen to only attack Sanguine since he was the one that had stopped your movement. Many, not just a human, would have been stricken by fear of fighting a werewolf and a vampire at the same time. The thought of them having formed a bond with the werewolf before, further fueling this fear of theirs, and they would have only turned their battle to Sanguine alone, leaving Fenrir out of it. But you turned your blade against both of them instantly. That is what I need in you. Not only do you believe in your power, but you also had the bravery to identify something that you considered bad and instantly tear apart any sort of facade and strike at exactly what needed to be struck at. That is what I need. I need your directness. When you see the enemy, you know it is the enemy, and you turn your blade to them instantly. Many people, even those strong, would only turn their blade to their most hated enemies, leaving the enemy who they had some sort of obviously fake bond with out of it or don't hate that much. I want a person that identifies the enemies and makes no qualification about them. You don't seem like a person who would bootlick because many people, even with their strength, are limited by their indirectness. I have no need for you to hate the top 10 families or anything. But what I know and need is that, if there comes a day when the top 10 families decide to throw humans as the meat shield in the war by bringing out some bullshit excuse that seems righteous but is actually fake, and the human leaders, due to their foolishness and their current act of bootlicking, have no choice but to agree. I am confident that if you had enough power to challenge them, you would rise to your feet and turn your blade to that bullshit, just like how you turned your blade to Fenrir at the same time. If you can assure me that you will always be who you are, clearly differentiating enemies and friends instantly and never afraid to raise your blade to the enemies, then I need not for you to be a hero or hate the top 10 families or anything else. That is enough for me. Would he always make no differentiation between his enemies, giving no qualms about them and taking them for who they really were? Ryuk could say he would always be like that, as not being so would be contrary to his own self. So now he had no other reason not to agree. Then I agree to become your intern. He replied to Mad White, who nodded his head before his hands stretched to the side. Then, he exerted force on the empty space, as Ryuk witnessed the space shattering into pieces like glass, soon breaking apart and revealing a darkened void on the other side. Come. I want to show you something first, the man said as he placed his hands on Ryuk's shoulder, and the next instant, they both disappeared into the darkness of the void. The space began repairing itself, soon completely closing up and leaving the top of the skyscraper empty of life. The world to Ryuk was entirely pitch black. There was no light at all, and it was like the second he kept staying within this patch of darkness, the more he began forgetting who he was, as if his memories were slowly being erased. The only comfort within this abyss was the hand on his shoulder, confirming the presence of someone he could still faintly remember. But then, the sound of glass shattering awoke him as he felt visible light and soon stepped into it. Hoo-hoo! A loud exhale left Ryuk as he crouched to the floor, breathing raggedly. The sensation, it was definitely not like a teleporter. Is that your first time in a void? Mad White's curious voice rang out before he chuckled, looking at the Ryuk, who seemed to have gone through hell and barely survived. I really might need to do a lot of things. The weakness lasted only for a few seconds, and Ryuk pressed it down, regaining himself. Looking around him, it was a rocky, mountainous place, with broken-down rocks and half-destroyed mountains whose edges sometimes bore the scars of blades. In some places, remnants of elements that were inherently destructive could be seen, judging by how gravity seemed to have gone faulty in the area. This here is a lost battle plane, one of the places where the war between Indearths and interdimensional beings was waged. Mad White began his story as he stepped forward, resuming his walk into the distance, and Ryuk rapidly followed after him. These interdimensional beings were said to be on the level of the Nulls themselves, their threat level equal to them. But thankfully, they were only 3, so dealing with them wasn't that difficult at least. One of the things we couldn't answer about them is where they came from, he completed, as Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed before he asked. But interdimensional beings can only come into Endearth through the interdimensional gates, right? Yes, you're right. We couldn't find what gate they came in from. Something that is very abnormal, as once a gate opens on Endearth, it sends a wave across the vicinity, and that is picked up by our gate-sensing technological artifact. Mad White replied as they both disappeared quickly through the mountainous plains. But this event has piqued my curiosity for many years now, and while others have paid it no more mind, since they have successfully defeated the interdimensional beings, they find it no use to keep looking for the gate where these guys came from. But I have, because I have noticed something that most don't know about those 3 interdimensional beings. Mad White said with a grin that drew Ryuk's attention. And what's that? Those 3 aliens are actually young. Very young, he said, causing Ryuk to raise an eyebrow. Initially, Mad White had just said those 3 aliens were on the threat level of the Nulls, and now he was claiming they were young. You don't seem to believe me, do you? After I got my hands on a severed body part of one of them, I found out the age of the bone from a friend of mine, and with surprise, he exclaimed that the bones were barely 25 years old. That is, the creatures that required almost half of Endearth's most powerful cultivators just to defeat were actually just 25-year-old kids. Hee. When I told the board about this, they thought I was mad or mocking them. Some took offense. But why wouldn't they? Their pride couldn't accept that Endearth required half of its most powerful force to take down 3 kids, he said with a cold harumph. But even then, that didn't stop me from continuing my research on these guys. And after 3 years, I finally cracked how they got in. The truth was, they never came in through a gate. They came in through a wormhole. One opened by an ancient ritual that involved each of their blood, or so my researcher says. Mad White said as he came to a pause, right before a wide rocky platform that was unervingly smooth, as if a mountain had been precisely slashed smoothly by a sword. The top of the mountain was covered in dust, but with an arm wave from Mad White, the dust was sent scattering away. What was revealed to Ryuk were runic lines. They trailed the entire top of the mountain, weird, bizarre runic lines which he had never seen or had any idea about. But it was clear this wasn't something that could be from Endearth, as even the faint aura radiating from these lines was alien to Ryuk himself. This is the gate through which those guys came from. But of course, as you can see, it's not a gate, and so we can't enter it. If it was actually a gate, it would have been ranked as a Lord level 1. But this thing seemed like a one-time use, and therefore was ignored as just a weird phenomenon. But I found a way to open this thing up. With this, Mad White said, bringing out a vial that contained a weird mixture of red, blue, and green liquid. This will open the forever closed gate. And do you know what I need you to do? He said, turning an amused glance toward Ryuk, who couldn't help but have his face turn pale. You can't be serious. Exactly. I need you to go into this gate when the door opens up, Mad White said seriously as Ryuk looked at him in shock for a while before he suddenly laughed out in mockery. Have you really gone mad? He asked with a raised eyebrow as Mad White also raised an eyebrow. Listen to yourself. You said the guys that came out of this gate required the joint effort of half of Endertha's most powerful cultivators to take down. If this was a gate, it would be ranked as Lord level, the most dangerous level of a gate. That means anything less than the plane of Cataclysm going into that gate would be doing nothing but suicide. And you want me, a core plane of Ascension kiddo, to go in? You're essentially trying to convince me to go to my death. Do you think I'm that dumb? Ha ha ha. Ryuk couldn't help but start another bout of laughter towards the end of his words. One could say this was the biggest joke he had ever heard. You're the one not making sense of what I said earlier, you dummy. Mad White shot back snorting. I told you the guys who came out of this gate are young, and not only that, look at the vial in my hands. This is a drop of their blood. Can you see the different colors? That means they must be different races. My guess. Beyond this gate isn't any ordinary interdimensional world. It should be a training ground for alien geniuses. Your guess, which means you yourself haven't gone in, Ryuk stated with narrowed eyes as Mad White shrugged. I've tried only to get thrown out. The gate refused me. And why is that? Because I'm too old. It only accepts those that are young. There is a hole at the end of this line that is very small, and when I tried forcing my way through, it didn't allow me in. I was too big for that hole. Even after I tried forcefully expanding it, it was like fighting against a primordial rule. I got thrown out in the end. And that made sense since the guys who came in were also young-looking. My guess? The gate won't accept anything beyond the age of 25. That still doesn't say this is some sort of cultivation ground for alien geniuses. It's just like me, an elf, and a fallen guy entering into a dimensional gate. We all might look different from one another to the race in that gate, but the fact is that we are all Enderths, perhaps just belonging to another race. That could have been the same for those guys. Okay, you're right. Cultivating ground or not, the reason why I want you to go into the gate is not to die. I just think that, Mad White said, pausing, and Ryuk raised an eyebrow as he watched the man inhale deeply before rising to his feet. Look, Ryuk, out there in the world, there are 25-year-old guys with enough power to take on half of the most powerful warriors of Enderth. I believe this is a result of something they knew, and we don't. Their world would no doubt be far more advanced than ours, and the skills and abilities they displayed in that battle were enough to reduce the entire area to such a devastated state. The battle took 3 days before they could finally be defeated. Their power is undoubted, Ryuk. Don't you have the faintest bit of curiosity in you? To go to their world and see things from their eye level. To experience what power means to them. These guys might not even be the greatest geniuses of that world. Or if they were, then their entire race might just come barging in for revenge. But they never did, as if those guys were nobodies. Don't you feel the slightest curiosity to know why they are so strong at such a young age? Mad White asked, looking at Ryuk, who narrowed his eyes for a while, but then the light in them dimmed. To be honest, Ryuk also felt curiosity. These guys were really powerful and most certainly young too. But then, this before him was something equivalent to a Lord-level gate. Entering it would be suicide, and the chance of surviving for him was just too small. He was curious, of course, but at the cost of his life? Wasn't that too much of a price to pay for something such as curiosity? I see. Once again, you don't have that intense curiosity like I do, Mad White said in a down tone. Well, he said, throwing the blue vial to Ryuk as he grabbed it. That's the key to the gate. In case you eventually change your mind, he said as Ryuk caught the vial and watched as Mad White passed by him. Let's get going back, he said as he carved a line of violet energy in the space. And Ryuk followed, stepping into the vortex, dreading the lack of silence once more. I'll take my leave now, Ryuk said as both he and Instructor Mad White appeared before the elevator, and it seemed Mad White needed to follow him down again, so Ryuk decided to bid this guy farewell. But just as he was stepping into the elevator, his shoulder was grabbed, and he turned his head to Mad White. I'll say one last thing, Mad White said as Ryuk paused. If you never go into that portal, you'll never be as strong as those guys. You never will, nor will you even be close. And you'll have no choice but to endure the fact that there are kids out there stronger than you, even after you spend 100 years cultivating relentlessly. That truth will haunt you forever. So make sure to think about this when you have some time. Hopefully we meet again, he said as Ryuk finally entered the elevator, and its gates soon shut open, the last thing Ryuk saw being the retreating back of Instructor Mad White. Dying. It was the sound of the elevator opening up as Ryuk stepped in and collapsed onto the sofa. Turning his head behind, he could see through the window, and it was currently nighttime, with the lights from the various structures emanating from them, giving the place just as nice a view as the morning itself. Damn, I'm so tired, Ryuk cursed under his breath, exhaling loudly. His head was currently buzzing uncontrollably, and looking at his watch, he could see it was already 11:31 p.m. He ought to go to sleep to avoid coming late again tomorrow. And speaking of tomorrow, their classes for the next day still haven't been sent yet, Ryuk muttered as he rose from his bed and headed into the bedroom. But then, drop! Something fell from his pocket as he looked at the floor and saw the vial resting by the sofa. It was strange vial, given to him by Mad White to open the portal. That is useless, Ryuk pointed out before ignoring the vial and heading to his door. But then he stopped at the last second. His hand clutched against the knob yet refusing to open it. The words began echoing loudly in his head. If you never go into that portal, you'll never be as strong as those guys. You never will, nor will you even be close. And you'll have no choice but to endure the fact that there are kids out there stronger than you even after you spend 100 years cultivating. I don't need to go and get myself killed. I have everything I need, the system, Isha, new unpenetrated spots. All I need is time, not to venture into a Lord-ranked portal meant only for those at the Cataclysm grade while being at the Ascension plane. Even the weakest thing in there would probably have no problem killing me off. So, might as well steer clear away, he muttered as he exerted force on the knob, trying to twist it open. But then, a system notification suddenly flashed, and on it were written words. Main quest activated. Accept Mad White's first training and enter into the portal. Rewards. All possessed skills leveled up to level 10. Plus 7 level-up cards. Plus 15,000 purchase points. The system interface suddenly flashed as Ryuk paused in his steps, his hand unconsciously slipping off from the knob, and his jaw dropped. His veins coated his eyes in crimson, and he unconsciously began heaving like an exhausted beast. So many rewards, Ryuk muttered, feeling something gnawing at his head like a ravaging beast, making it impossible for him to focus. "'Tisich my damn greed," Ryuk said while clicking his tongue, resisting the force but failing continuously. "Shut down, system," Ryuk roared in anger. Instantly, the system interface disappeared, and the greed monumentally stopped, giving Ryuk a breather as he collapsed on his back. First day of being an intern. And he asks me to venture into a devil-forsaken Lord rank portal. Who the hell does that, huh? Ryuk roared in anger, thinking back to Mad White's face, which he felt a dire urge to punch straight in. But then, his head cooled after a few seconds. I don't want to enter that portal. I'm not ready. I'm far from being ready. And Isha is still in slumber right now. Ryuk muttered, but then, a new notification flashed. Congratulations. Isha has successfully finished her evolution. Why is everyone teasing me today? Damn it! Ryuk yelled. But then, bam! Something landed onto the ground. Its rebounding weight was enough to send Ryuk flying up off his butt. What? What the hell? Ryuk mused as he looked up, and found a creature towering above him. One whose aura made his spine tingle. Is Isha? The creature before Ryuk was unlike anything he had ever known. Her body was now longer and more refined, obviously much taller too, as she cast her dark shadow over him. Her once soft scales had hardened into jagged, crystalline plates of pure white, some flaring up and revealing edges that were razor-sharp. These scales seemed to shimmer with an eerie cold glow, as if they were absorbing and reflecting the surrounding light, making her appear like a spectral entity born from a raging blizzard. Her head had elongated into a vicious draconic shape, adorned with a crown of backward-curving ice horns. Her once cute-looking maw had changed into a snout, forming an asymmetrically yet predatory shape, lined with jagged ice fangs. Her nostrils exhaled no air but a visible cold mist, slamming head-on against Ryuk below, covering him in ice. Looking a little behind her thick, muscular shoulders, Ryuk saw the massive white wings that had transformed into razor-sharp ice-forged weapons, lined with blade-like frozen protrusions along the edges. At the forearm joints of her wings, curved, hooked claws had grown, twisted and serrated, their sharpness making it seem like they would have no problem tearing through cold, hard steel with ease. Boom! Boom! The floor beneath Ryuk shattered to pieces as claws slammed into the ground, now longer, sharper, and more jagged, resembling pure ice daggers attached to her limbs. A few meters away were her back legs, now thicker and more muscular. Each foot bore 3 massive, curved talons, coated in freezing energy. With each step, the ground beneath her fractured and froze from the sheer heaviness. Gone was the warmth of a familiar companion. Isha was now a true frost wyvern, a monster of ice and destruction. Gruul! An inhumane growl escaped her lips, sounding like a howling winter storm with a chilling resonance that would send fear to the bones of even the bravest warriors. Hey, system, what's wrong? Ryuk asked as he felt Isha's draconic head closing in on his body, making his instincts instantly back off. After Isha's evolution, she has undergone a significant change, and her bloodline seems to be reverting to her former primordial one. Her instincts toward host seem to have changed, making her more predatory than friendly. This happens with every beast's evolution when they become stronger, a feeling that they have no need to listen to their tamers, and in doing so, they try to subdue them instead. This arises from their belief that they are stronger than their master and, therefore, that the master is unworthy of them. This belief is further fueled by their new predatory instincts. I hadn't thought this would happen with Isha, due to host's close bond with her, but I guess I was wrong. In this case, host's only hope to regain back Isha is to red-aim her. Red-aim her. Red-aim Isha? Ryuk asked in confusion, but his face changed in the next second when a tiny, narrow slit appeared in Isha's eyes, flaring with a crimson light. A powerful roar shook the entire living room, booming through the area, sending the sofas flying into the walls, and in the next instant, R.I.P. Boom! Shot at her. The sound of the air being sliced into nothing rang out, followed by a heavy collision. Then, the wall's glass shattered into pieces as a figure smashed through it, soaring away erratically into the air before slamming into another building structure, tearing through the glass and disappearing within. Splat. Blood splashed into the air as Isha dangled its claw to the side, flicking off the red blood, and then, vroom, vroom. The sound of its wings beating heavily resounded as it floated a few centimeters above the ground. And then, oh! The air pressure shot backward instantly as Isha tore through the open glass, ripping apart the entire structure and following rapidly after Ryuk's figure, its predatory aura vastly increasing. What the hell is going on? was Ryuk's thought as he felt a monumental force slam into his head, ripping apart a chunk of flesh. Before he knew it, he had smashed through 2 layers of glass and was now in another structure, unable to stop himself from continuously slamming through walls. Soon, he crashed through the last wall, shooting out of the building and disappearing once more into the air. A powerful roar surged toward Ryuk like a tsunami. He barely sighted the humongous snow-clad figure rushing toward him before another gigantic swipe was taken at him. Instantly, Ryuk crossed his hands into an X shape. Shockwaves exploded outward once more as he faded into thin air, before a gigantic crater appeared down below, tearing backward and carving a massive gorge into the roadside. Finally, the gorge stopped after forming a mountain of 5 meters, and at its foot was none other than Ryuk, looking pathetic with torn clothes and a bleeding face. The 3 diagonal marks present on his face managed to clinch through one eye and another on the side of his head, but they were slowly healing. Boom! The floor shook as Isha appeared on top of Ryuk. Then, it opened its gigantic maw wide as powerful frost energy began gathering in its mouth. And then, it slammed head-on into Ryuk, burying him within the frost that lasted for a full minute, instantly freezing the shattered ground into nothing and leaving a gigantic white abyss in its wake. Isha's predatory glance stared at the hole in the ground, huffing loudly. When it sensed no sign of movement, it raised its head to the sky and then, What the hell is that? A young man, close to 3 meters tall, said in shock as he leaped from his bed and ran to his living room, barely sighting the figure of a human flying along with glass shards. Quickly following behind was none other than a gigantic creature whose aura made his heart chill. This was none other than Eren Giantkin, the #1 student in the hierarchy, and he had been awakened when he felt the growl from a beast that shook his soul with fear even from his sleep. In an instant, his glass shattered apart as Eren burst through it, soaring after Isha's figure. But he wasn't the only one. The entire top 10, even those who had been sleeping, were awakened by the sudden roar and glass shattering. As they all came out and followed after, suddenly, the sky above the newcomer area had about a dozen instructors appear in the air. Their gazes narrowed at Isha, who was currently roaring out in dominance. "Is that a wyvern?" An instructor asked in shock as the others narrowed their eyes at Isha's figure. "How did that get there?" Another asked. "Leave the questions for later. It attacked a student. We have to get that guy out of there before he dies to the intense frost," one of the instructors said, beginning to take a step forward. But suddenly, ha 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 ha, ha 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 ha, ha 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 ha, an inhumane laughter rang out, coming from none other than the ice chasm in the ground beneath Isha. The icy aura suddenly began shattering into pieces, and a figure slowly stepped out of the chasm. Isha's roar of dominance stopped as its predatory gaze stared at the figure, which was none other than Ryuk, who had the biggest smile on his face. "Oh, my little Isha, I never thought you capable of such ferocity," Ryuk stated as he walked out of the chasm, twisting his back and neck once and fixing his shoulders back into their angles as he came out fully. His shirt had been torn off from the power of Isha's frost breath attack, but right now, he had not a single wound on him, with the various cuts on his face having completely cleared. RIP. In the next instant, the entire air was sliced apart as Isha's claw slapped out toward Ryuk's head with power. A sonic boom erupted forth, but then, the sound of a loud clap rang throughout, but it was no ordinary clap. Another round of shockwaves rippled through the sky, and the instructors, along with the top 10 students, who had managed to arrive first, watched as Ryuk's hand clapped into Isha's claw, both of them bulging their hands to an uncontrollable level. "You've grown stronger than me, Isha," Ryuk stated as he felt his hand losing out in the contest of strength. Isha soon slammed out its second limb, but Ryuk clapped onto it again, stopping it dead in its tracks, but not for long. Isha began exerting its body weight and pressed onto Ryuk, causing the ground beneath him to shatter into pieces as Ryuk's knees began buckling from the unbearable might running amok within him. Isha's strength, it's thrice as much as mine? Ryuk's mind analyzed as a prideful smile appeared on his face. Then he raised his head to stare into Isha's eyes. But still, I'm your king. Activate King's aura. Immediately, King's aura was activated. Ryuk's eyes turned fully blue as a strange aura began undulating from his body. The same could be said for Isha, whose aura also increased due to the skill, making her power even more refined. But then, that's enough, Ryuk called out. Instantly, a roar left Isha's lips as she violently struggled against the strange power, yet failed monumentally. She found herself retracting her heavy claws from Ryuk's arms and backing up repeatedly. A roar. A powerful force surged through the world as her claws expanded to 3 meters, glistening with frozen energy, before instantly slapping toward Ryuk's head in the next second. But Ryuk made 0 moves to dodge. ASPS. Just when everyone expected his head to be blown into mush, Isha's paws stopped just an inch from his face. Yet the shockwave blew Ryuk's hair erratically. A deep and menacing growl left Isha's lips, but then she suddenly paused her actions when she saw the world starting to turn pitch black. The world was beginning to fade, and one thing was radiating a spine-chilling aura. Turning her beastly gaze toward Ryuk, she snarled, but then stopped when she saw what was behind him. Ginormous beasts, their mere heights reaching toward the heavens. Heavy spectral shadows oozed out from their bodies, all of their eyes boring straight into Isha. Instantly, a monumental wave of pressure knocked into her. Not one that disgusted her and prompted her to fight back, but one that made her realize her own weakness. It chilled her to the bone, canceling any wave of resistance in her heart. The level of power they possessed made her look like an ordinary mortal, and the simple Ryuk, whom she had deemed weak, now seemed more like a god, whose absolute will would be instantly fulfilled by the horde of beasts behind him. In an instant, all her doubts about his weakness faded, and slowly, her claws began withdrawing. The same happened with the horns on her head, which retracted back into her skin. Her sharp ice scales rearranged themselves until they formed normal scales, and her head involuntarily bowed down at Ryuk's feet. The world had no idea what had occurred. They had only seen her slap her paw toward Ryuk, stop herself, withdraw it, change into a less threatening form, and then bow down. Step, step. Calmly, Ryuk stepped forward as his hands stretched out toward Isha, landing at the center of her head. Then he ordered, "You've caused enough of a scene here, Isha. Return to the pet world." Ryuk commanded in his mind, and instantly Isha faded away into thin air, under the furrowed gaze of the instructors, who slowly floated down. "Deactivate King's aura," Ryuk ordered, and his eyes returned to their normal color. His aura reverted back to its usual weak-looking state. "Now, how do I settle the instructors?" Ryuk muttered as he looked at them, watching as they all walked toward him with furrowed eyebrows. He couldn't help but scratch the back of his head. Ryuk was about to say when the first order came, "Where is the wild beast?" A male instructor asked Ryuk, a frown on his face. Immediately, Ryuk threw away his casual aura. These weren't people he could deceive with jokes. "It's not a wild beast. It's a pet of mine. As for where it is, it's in a safe place and you need not worry," he said, his tone leaving no open doors. "Well, a pet wouldn't send you flying out of a window in the dead of the night, crash you out of an entire skyscraper, and carve a mini mountain into the road, would it? If it weren't night when the students were all away, then your pet would have done more than just damage buildings and injure them too. A frost wyvern is a powerful beast at the plane of dominion, a threat to all the newcomers here. So somehow, that should actually be a concern, shouldn't it?" A female instructor butted in, her points seemingly making sense. But then Ryuk stepped forth, passing through their circle and heading toward his dorm room. "What you want is for me to give it to you, and by how you didn't even ask if I was all right and instead asked for her directly. I already know. She must have managed to pick your curiosity a little heavier than my own health. So don't come to me with that being a threat to the students' bullshit. Ryuk stated, his voice as cold as ever. Then he suddenly stopped. All of the destruction is a result of a little skirmish between us both, and I'll be taking account for the damaged buildings. If such a crash-out happens next time, I'll give it out myself. So you need not worry, he said. The floor around him caved in as he prepared to take off, but he suddenly stopped when he felt a hand resting on his shoulder. And who the hell gave you permission to leave, human? The instructor with flaming red eyes and hair asked as Ryuk slowly turned his head backward and saw the remaining instructors looking at him, with no sign of stepping in. It was clear they wouldn't be letting Ryuk leave this place until he gave up Isha. Get your claws off me, vampire, Ryuk stated quietly. The instructor's red eyes flashed with a taunting light. Make me. In the next instant, the world seemed to silence itself for a second before Ryuk. The air was suddenly slashed with untraceable speed. The hand resting on Ryuk's shoulder instantly left it, as the vampire instructor shot backward toward the crowd of instructors, his eyes flashing with shock. Gasp! Gasps escaped the lips of some students standing on the sidelines as they looked at the instructor. Slowly, the vampire instructor moved his hand toward his neck, where blood rained down. A thin, sharp line had appeared on his neck, oozing down with blood. If I had been just a split second slower, he would have ripped through my entire neck. But how? He holds no weapon, the vampire instructor thought in shock. All the other instructors immediately entered combat mode, the air pressure thickening to a crushing level as they locked their gazes onto Ryuk, whose hand had morphed into gigantic, steel-like devil claws. Looks like I don't have a choice. I'll have to take you all on. That's enough. Before the showdown between the instructors and Ryuk could continue, a voice rang out from above. Everyone in the scene turned their heads upward and found a man standing in the air. White shirt and trousers, white hair, and piercing blue eyes that contained hundreds of interlocking runes, shifting into different forms with every passing second. A substantial wave of pressure slammed straight down onto everything in the area, instantly blowing away the lingering tension in the air. Even the instructor's eyes flashed in shock, while Ryuk's eyes narrowed. Sir Mad White? The instructors all called out as Mad White landed on the ground, standing between them and Ryuk. Leave. That was Sir Mad White's second word, directed at the instructors. Even though their expressions showed clear unwillingness, all of them bowed their heads before soaring into the sky, leaving the scene without another word. After they were gone, Sir Mad White grabbed Ryuk's shoulder before he could blink. In the next instant, all Ryuk felt was the air violently slapping his face as the world turned into a blur. When he opened his eyes a moment later, he found himself in front of the shattered glass of his apartment, only to be unceremoniously tossed inside. He rolled on the ground a couple of times before crashing into his disarranged sofa and coming to a stop. Ow! A golden card flew rapidly past Ryuk's hands, curving in the air before landing in Mad White's grasp. Ryuk groaned, his head still spinning, but the moment he looked at his watch, his face paled. 700 Apex points. What the hell? Ryuk cursed out loud as he watched Mad White casually tuck the golden card into his pocket. That's for the damages you caused, Instructor Mad White said. He was about to step away when he suddenly stopped, his blue eyes locking onto Ryuk's figure. Immediately, a sense of extreme danger washed over Ryuk's body. Every hair on his skin stood on end. His heartbeat pounded violently in his chest, and a faint sensation of death crept over him as Mad White slowly stretched out his hand toward him. Then, the entire air froze. Ryuk's eyes barely caught sight of space itself rippling before his hand, and instinctively, he tore out of the wall he was in and cleaved out his scythe toward the rippling space. But, boom! Ryuk's scythe was shredded into pieces, blown apart by an overwhelming force. Blood burst from Ryuk's hands as his weapon was obliterated, and something slammed into his chest, caving it in and flinging him backward. He crashed into the very wall he had come from, sending cracks all over its surface. Bleergurk. Endurance. 0. The system notification flashed before Ryuk's dazed gaze. Blood dripped from his ears, nose, and mouth. His arms had been blown away, embedded into the wall behind him, leaving him armless. "Let this be the last time you lay hands on an instructor." Those were the last words of Instructor Madwhite before he vanished into thin air. Ryuk's head slowly dropped down, a faint smile forming on his face. "I really messed up tonight, didn't I?" Those were his last thoughts before he finally faded into unconsciousness. But then, all the blood splattered in the room suddenly began floating upward before diving straight back into Ryuk's body. His wounds started repairing themselves, even though he still didn't stir from unconsciousness. "Seems like your disciple has a few screws loose in his head?" The voice rang through the dark night sky the moment Madwhite left Ryuk's building. He turned his head upward and found 3 charmingly beautiful women, donning instructor uniforms. But unlike the normal ones the instructors wore, theirs were pitch black in color. Even Madwhite's blue eyes flashed slightly as he soared upwards toward them. "My greetings to the Order Guardians," he greeted with respect. But the women waved him off, instead turning their gazes behind him toward the cracked glass of Ryuk's apartment. "I can't argue with that," Madwhite said. "But the Academy deploying you 3 for a student-instructor skirmish, that's something I never saw coming at all," he completed. One of the women giggled. "The Academy needs a scapegoat," she said. "A reminder to strike fear into the hearts of students who dare to lay hands on an instructor." And also, another added, "An instructor was injured. Even if it was just a small slash, it was still an attack." "He seems like the perfect scapegoat," she completed. Madwhite hummed in response. "That still doesn't make sense," he thought. He knew how strong these 3 women were. Deploying them just to punish Ryuk, a mere newcomer who didn't even kill anyone, was an overkill. Lesser-ranked Order instructors could have easily subdued him in seconds. Sending these 3 was like sending a lion to catch an ant. It was simply too much. "Are you planning to take him away?" Madwhite asked, turning his gaze back to the women. All 3 turned to look into his piercing blue eyes before the third, the one who had never smiled or spoken before, finally uttered a single sentence. "Would you let us, after you already punished him yourself?" she asked, her eyebrows furrowed. Madwhite shrugged. "If you wanted to take him, I wouldn't mind," he said casually. But then, his expression darkened into a chilling smile. "But the next time a skirmish between an instructor and a student happens, you'll find the student dead before you can even get to the scene." His smile faded, and the blue energy in his eyes pulsed violently, sending ripples of pressure through the air from the sheer power being exuded. "Calm your energy, Madwhite. This has nothing to do with what you're thinking," the Order Guardian said, stepping back slightly. But in the next instant, gigantic black axes with aura that continuously shattered the space around their edges appeared in their hands. They stared cautiously at Madwhite, faint beads of sweat dripping down their faces. "Then good night, Order instructors," Madwhite said, turning his back to them and leaving the scene. As he disappeared, the Order instructors withdrew their weapons, wiping the sweat off their brows. "Tsh, we should have acted on the human sooner," one of them muttered in dissatisfaction. "Now that Madwhite's eyes are on him, we can't do much." With that, all 3 vanished into the night. "Dry thing, dry thing, dry thing." The sharp sound of ringing echoed through the demolished room. A deep groan rumbled from Ryuk's lips as he peeled himself off the cracked wall, landing heavily on the ground. His hand instinctively clutched his head, where a brutal headache pounded like a sledgehammer striking repeatedly. But what drew his attention the most was the pulsing energy vibrating through his right arm. His gaze snapped to his Apex watch, where a flashing notification caught his eye. "New class issued. Apex Energy Studies class begins in 3 hours. Time left, 58 minutes. "Oh," Ryuk muttered, rubbing his temples. 58 minutes. I still got some time left." But right before his eyes, the countdown shifted to 57. Maybe not so much time, he thought, forcing himself to his feet. The sky outside was beginning to lighten, and now he could fully take in the devastation around him. Claw marks marred the floors, shattered glass crunched beneath his feet, and the broken remains of tables and sofas were strewn against the walls. The most striking damage, however, was the massive cracks webbing across the windows. The entire room was a disaster. Luckily, Mad White had deducted some points to cover part of the damages. Ryuk recalled that the mentioned repairs would be handled soon. His glass would be replaced and the living room reassembled. But as soon as he thought about the destruction, his mind drifted back to the real danger from last night. His eyes narrowed. Yesterday, I almost fought the instructors. Ryuk clutched his head in disbelief. Last night, he had been forced into an impossible choice. Give up Isha to the academy? There was no doubt about what they would have done to her. Most likely, it would have been the last time he ever saw her. And what could he have done after that? Nothing. The academy would have fed him some excuse about how she disappeared or was disposed of. And that would have been the end of it. Faced with such a choice, there was no way in hell he was giving Isha up. Not even for a second. So, in the end, he had two options. 1. Hand Isha over, return to his room, and sleep soundly. 2. Stand his ground, fight, and possibly get crushed. Thinking back, his choice seemed like a really dumb one. What the hell was I thinking? But even now, Ryuk didn't regret it. If he were put in that situation again, he would still make the same decision. Because Ryuk never abandoned his contracted beasts, no matter the circumstances. Fortunately, his stubbornness had lasted long enough for Mad White to intervene and save his ass. But if Mad White never showed up, then Host would most likely have been beaten into the ground and locked away in some dungeon. The system's voice chimed in bluntly. Ryuk rolled his eyes but quickly refocused. Speaking of Mad White, that attack, it was just supposed to be a lesson. Yet my scythe was shattered, my arms ripped apart. It was as if a mountain had been hurled at him, crushing every bit of his resistance. Was this the true power of the instructors? Ryuk shivered at the memory. He had sensed Mad White's attack just in time, which allowed him to twist midair and slash out with his scythe. But even then, he was sent flying. His Nano Reaper scythe barely resisted before his arms burst apart. His chest caved in, and his entire body crumpled like a ragdoll. Mad White hadn't even hit him directly. He had just stretched his hand in his direction. The sheer difference in power was terrifying. I'm still so far from their level. Ryuk clenched his fists. All of this could have been avoided if he had known that Isha would transform upon her evolution. Not only did he almost lose her, but he also nearly lost his life. Who knows what would have happened if Mad White hadn't stepped in. And speaking of Isha, Ryuk's gaze darkened. Come out, Isha. The air distorted, and in an instant, a massive creature materialized before him. Before he could react, thud. His body was slammed onto the floor beneath a set of massive claws, a long tongue slathering saliva all over him. Get off me, you snaky bastard, Ryuk growled, shoving Isha's massive head aside as he climbed to his feet, dripping with drool. Jiro WWLL. A deep, rumbling growl escaped Isha's throat. The moment Ryuk shot her a disgusted glare, she quickly looked away, avoiding his gaze. What the hell came over you last night? Ryuk demanded, folding his arms. Isha let out another low growl, shifting uncomfortably under his gaze. Host need not worry. A beast only undergoes the hostile evolution effect once. Now that she has been tamed, her wild instincts have fully settled. To her, last night will feel like nothing more than a dream. Jiro WWLL. Another low growl rumbled from Isha's throat. But then, I'm sorry. The words rang directly into Ryuk's mind. His entire body stiffened. His eyes darted around the room in alarm. Who's there? He asked cautiously, his senses sharpening. It was a small voice, gentle yet eerie, and it had come from behind him. Then suddenly, it's me, your nightmare, Ryuk. The voice carried a ghostly tone, snarky and playful. Slowly, Ryuk turned his head and froze. Isha sat there, her massive claws covering her lips as she snickered mischievously. But the moment he stared at her, she stopped, tilting her head in innocent confusion. "Don't tell me." "Yes, it's Isha." Silence. Then realization hit. Isha was talking. For a brief second, Ryuk wanted to scream in excitement. But then he remembered the absolute disaster of last night. And instead, he just let out a long sigh, shaking his head. "You know what?" He turned away, rubbing his temples. "I have a class to attend. Apex Energy, the very essence of all combat strength in this academy. You cultivate it, you wield it, you push past your limits with it. But before you can master it, you must answer a simple question." The crisp, clear voice rang out through the hall, where a total of about 500 students sat, their attention fixed on a lady surrounded by various holograms depicting different elemental images. Gas-like in nature and possessing various colors, Ryuk immediately recognized one among them. A white-colored energy, unmistakably frost energy. "What is Apex Energy, really?" Instructor Catherine asked, her piercing purple eyes scanning the students. "Some say Apex Energy is the fundamental power that governs all life and combat. It is divided into forms, as you can see." She continued, swiping through the floating holograms. "There are the basic elements fire, water, earth, and air, along with more complex amalgamations of these elements. The most common amalgamations are dual-element combinations, followed by the rarer triple-element combinations," she explained, her voice drawing the students in. "For example, lava is a fusion of fire and earth. Metal is a combination of fire and earth. Lightning arises from fire and air. And frost, a blend of water and air." She was still explaining when, suddenly, a heavy tremor shook the ground beneath them, causing a ripple of shock through the hall. The students turned their attention toward Ryuk, confusion and curiosity flashing in their eyes. "What is that?" one student muttered. Instructor Catherine followed their gazes to Ryuk, who sat frozen under the weight of the stairs. He was about to speak when a chilling sensation crawled up his spine. Slowly, he turned his head upward. Isha. She was right behind him. One of her claws rested under her chin as she observed the instructor with a thoughtful expression. Ryuk's face twisted. "What the hell are you doing now, Isha? Get back!" he whispered harshly, barely concealing his frustration. But then, a voice echoed in his mind. "The lady is interesting. I want to learn from her. Stop that bullshit and get back inside," he hissed under his breath. The class had fallen completely silent, making his whisper seem unbearably loud. "No, I order you," Ryuk snapped, but Isha remained unmoved. That was when a notification flashed before his eyes. "Error. Host. Host can no longer forcefully send Isha back to the pet world due to her increased intelligence and power. However, she may come in or go out of her own will. If the host wishes to keep Isha in the pet world, King's aura must be activated and maintained to prevent her from emerging again." Ryuk gritted his teeth, frustration evident. But before he could react, ahem, Instructor Catherine cleared her throat. Ryuk felt his soul leave his body as he turned, only to find her mere inches from his face. Her pink gaze locked onto him. You see. I'm so sorry, Instructor Catherine. I'll get her out now." Ryuk stammered, already preparing to activate King's aura. But then, Instructor Catherine stretched her hand toward Isha's large forehead. To Ryuk's astonishment, Isha didn't recoil. Instead, she allowed the instructor's hand to rest gently against her head, her eyes narrowing slightly in what could only be described as pleasure. "Your assessment never revealed that you were a beast tamer," Instructor Catherine remarked, her gaze shifting to Ryuk. His brows furrowed. "How does she know about beast tamers? You didn't think you were the only one with that ability, did you?" she asked with a knowing smile. "Beast tamers may be rare, but there are a few dozen among the second and third-year students." Ryuk's eyes widened. "There are? Your frost wyvern seems well-domesticated and highly intelligent. I can vouch for everyone in this class being safe. It can stay." She gave Isha one last affectionate rub before returning to the front of the class. Who? Ryuk exhaled in relief. For a moment, he had genuinely thought he was in trouble. As I was saying, Instructor Catherine continued, there are triple-element amalgamations as well. For instance, radiation, which is a fusion of fire, light, and darkness. Gravity, a combination of earth, air, and darkness, and so on. Beyond these double and triple amalgamations, there exists a rarer category known as unique amalgamations, and I believe there are a few geniuses among you who possess them. Her words stirred whispers among the students as they exchanged glances. The holographic elemental projections around her faded. One of the most notable unique elements is the void element, also referred to as the shadow element. Which among you possesses the shadow element? The class hardly needed to search. A shadow walker rose to his feet. With a slow, deliberate motion, he raised a finger, and at its tip, flames of shadow danced ominously. The students observed in fascination. Shadow walkers were usually draped in dark robes, their figures concealed. However, Academy regulations required uniforms, forcing them to shed their cloaks. Now, their true appearance was exposed. Surprisingly, they looked humanoid. Their ash-black skin bore dark, intricate lines running across their bodies. Their pitch-black eyes swirled with a strange vortex at their core, and some even had shadow-like gas seeping from their shoulders. Watching the eerie, flickering shadow on the young man's finger, Ryuk couldn't help but wonder, what exactly was the shadow element capable of? Another special element is the life element, a fusion of earth, water, and light. A female elf raised her hand. In her palm, a ball of brilliant energy swirled, its aura brimming with vitality, growth, and incredible regenerative power. Then, of course, Instructor Catherine continued, there are even more unique elements, some of which are only possessed by interdimensional beings. In short, some claim that apex energy is simply a manifestation of a wielder's natural affinity. But that is merely a textbook definition. Her tone shifted, becoming sharper. Outdated and basic knowledge, only suitable for children. A few students frowned. That was the definition they had always known. Apex energy, the expression of one's natural affinity. Yet, Instructor Catherine was suggesting otherwise. Was there something more to it? A more widely accepted definition of apex energy is that apex energy is pure strength. The stronger your apex core, apex realm, or apex domain, the more power you can exert. It's all about dominance. If your apex energy surpasses another's, you win. Simple as that, Instructor Catherine explained, a definition that not many of the students disagreed with. Truly, that was the basic reality of this world. If you possessed powerful apex energy, you won the battle. If you didn't, you lost. It was as simple as that. But you must understand that brute strength alone has never won a war. Ask the fallen kingdoms of the past or the defeated interdimensional beings who were once a massive threat to us in dearths. Beings whose names are now forgotten, while we still exist. You all must understand that power without understanding is just chaos waiting to collapse. The truest and most apt definition of apex energy is that it is a will. A will? Some of the students asked, perplexed. Yes, apex energy is a will. It responds to intent, to emotion, to belief, at least for those who harness it. And while factors like talent, artifacts, and differences in the grade of cultivation techniques can cause variations in power between individuals, apex energy being a will of its own is why two people at the same cultivation level can have completely different strengths. It's not just about gathering more energy or making your energy purer with better cultivation techniques. It's about understanding it, bending it to your will. So if apex energy equals strength plus intent plus, there has to be a factor that completes this equation. A final, necessary piece of the puzzle. Anyone? She asked, scanning the silent class. Then, a student answered. Control. Yes, control. Instructor Catherine confirmed before shaking her head. But then, Why is it that someone who possesses immense apex energy, absolute intent, and perfect control still loses a battle? The student who had answered fell silent, but another voice spoke up. They lacked adaptability. The one who spoke was the only male elf among his race, and Instructor Catherine loudly clapped her hands. Correct. Apex energy is not just a force. It is alive. It adapts. It evolves just like you. Apex can be said to be a manifestation of a person's inner element, the basic definition, but it isn't just a simple manifestation. Apex itself is a will of its own. It has to be nurtured like a youngling, gently cultivated. You have to listen to it to believe in its ability. Only then can you truly harness its power. So you don't just spend all day sitting down and cultivating battle techniques, or cultivating endlessly. Let half of your focus go into listening to your apex energy. Feel it, believe in it. It has its own emotions and thoughts. It has its own attributes. Guide it to be on your side, and when you do, Instructor Catherine said as she slowly closed her eyes and then raised both hands up. Power. So much power that you couldn't possibly fathom lies at your fingertips, she said, as the curious students watched in awe. A sparkling pink flame appeared in the palm of Instructor Catherine before suddenly it burst open. The students all instinctively closed their eyes, expecting a monumental explosion, yet nothing happened. Instead, before them was no longer the classroom but a different world. A world of darkness, illuminated by countless pink stars and various constellations dancing in the distance. Mind you all! The voice of Instructor Catherine suddenly rang out, and as they turned their attention forward, they found her far above them in the void, hundreds of tiny purple energy balls swirling around her. This isn't a domain or a skill. This is an open void of my own apex energy, the world where my apex energy resides. In here, you are all subjected to its rules with no exception, and with a simple will of mine, you would become nothing but ashes, without me even needing to move a finger, she said, as the students widened their eyes. The colossal star-like constellations above them suddenly began revolving in the sky, gathering above their heads. They could feel the gravity in the air increasing monumentally, and an illusion of the constellations falling toward them appeared before each of them. But just before it could worsen, the world around them dispersed, and once more, they found themselves seated in their chairs. The only remnants of the experience were the barely visible pink flames dancing around Instructor Catherine's shoulders, rolling over her neck like a gentle wave, before finally dispersing into her. When you truly learn to master your own apex energy, listening to it and being able to communicate with it, battle techniques and the rest wouldn't be needed. For even battle techniques are like a chant that talks to the apex energy, allowing it to take a particular form. If you can converse with the apex energy, you would need no chant, thereby having no need to sit down practicing a single technique for months. Instead, you will be like the incarnation of thousands of battle techniques, every single one of your moves being followed by the will of the apex energy, thereby becoming a battle technique of its own. And with your apex energy being a will of its own, it holds many, many secrets, many worlds, many abilities, many traits that are beyond your and my knowledge, she said to them, causing the eyes of the students to light up. This was something they had no previous idea of. To think their own apex energy was an entity of its own, one that could potentially be conversed with, wasn't something that had ever crossed their minds. And the same could be said for Ryuk, who silently stared at Instructor Catherine before turning his gaze to his hands, doubt flashing in his eyes. This ice apex energy that I possess isn't mine. It's Isha's. Does it really have a will of its own? And can I really find out its limits? Ryuk mused in his heart as Instructor Catherine soon ended the class, bid them goodbye, while leaving the students in deep thought. You dickhead! You never told me you were a beast tamer. The roar of faint anger boomed in Ryuk's head as he felt a hand advancing above him, ready to slam a knock onto his head. But then, SWIPPPP. A claw flashed faster, slapping away the hand before it could touch Ryuk. www. A deep, threatening growl left Isha's lips as her maw opened wide, staring at the golden-haired girl, none other than Morgaine. It's okay, Isha, Ryuk stated, calming Isha, who only looked at Morgaine for a moment before turning her head away. Well, you never asked. He replied to Morgaine, who had her eyes on her hand, which had been slapped away by Isha. Her hand had reddened slightly, showing she had taken quite the damage from Isha's casual swipe. Now I see why you were so protective of it. It seems it wouldn't even allow me to touch you at all. Just as overprotective of you as you are of it, Morgaine muttered before asking. But somehow, this form of hers is a little different, isn't it? She was more of huge python when I last saw her. Or, is this another one? Ryuk shrugged his shoulders. She has grown. I never thought I would find a majestic frost wyvern in the outside world. Yet here is one before me. The voice echoed from behind, making Ryuk turn his gaze. He found a Naga standing before Isha, who shook her palms with her claws. She was one of the top Nagas, one ranked among the top 10, with a snow serpentine tail close to 1.5 meters in length trailing behind her. This one has a familiar bloodline. Isha's tiny voice echoed in Ryuk's mind as she looked at the Nagas, who turned her head to him. I am Seraphis, she introduced herself. Ryuk, he responded with a nod. The frost wyvern is an ancient royal beast of our Nagas families. The ones we have, though, are mostly in slumber. And according to our knowledge, there are almost none present in Endearth apart from them. It's a surprise that you would have one with you, Seraphis added, drawing a furrowed brow from Ryuk. This is the first time I'm hearing there are other frost wyverns out there. I thought she was the only one. Guess she's not so special after all. Pooh! Hey! Ryuk screamed as he watched Isha sneer in victory, having tapped the back of his head with her claws. Giggle. A giggle escaped Seraphis' lips as she watched Ryuk's clenched teeth and Isha's snickering expression. The frost wyverns in her family were usually so uptight and barely talked at all. If they did, they were incredibly authoritative and commanding. In fact, she had never seen a frost wyvern display any other emotions before at all. They mostly had indifferent expressions on their faces, and no matter what one did, they could never change their expressions. To see Isha's myriad expressions was definitely eye-opening. I hope to see her soon. Goodbye now, Seraphis said, waving to Ryuk and Isha, who waved their hands back. But then, a hand tapped on Ryuk's head for the second time. He furrowed his brows, turning to look at Morgaine, who currently had a bit of displeasure on her face. What again? You waved back for too long, Morgaine huffed. That's not a thing, is it? Ryuk raised an eyebrow. Don't get too familiar with Nagas, especially one who is a member of the royal family of her race. Nagas are known for their cunningness and illegal dealings. You know? She warned. Oh, she's a princess too? Interesting. Ryuk mused, rubbing his beardless jaw in deep thought. Why is that the only thing you heard? Morgaine snapped. Well, it's easy to meet people who are cunning and do illegal things all the time. But a princess? That's especially rare, you know? You dickhead. I'm a princess too, and you see me every day, Morgaine exclaimed. While she and Ryuk were bickering, Isha soon slipped out of the class. Only later, after she was gone, did Ryuk realize her fading presence. Wait, where is Isha? He asked, looking around, and that was when it dawned on him. Tisich, that white head will be the end of me one day. Ryuk mused, but then, don't worry, I'm close by and can get back into the pet world anytime. The voice resonated in his mind before he could make any move, and he unconsciously heaved a sigh. Hey Isha, I'm not the outgoing type in here. I like to keep my things secretive, you get? Don't go getting too familiar with the students. Not everyone you see smiling at you really likes you, Ryuk replied in his mind. Don't worry. If they don't like me, I'll just beat them until they do. Hey. Isha replied, and Ryuk rolled his eyes, deciding to ignore the issue as he headed outside the class as well. Dying. The sound of the elevator opening up resounded as a snowy white-haired figure stepped out. Stretching his hands, he reached for the knob, only to pause as he slowly turned his head behind him. His gaze pierced down through the glass of the skyscraper and locked onto a figure standing on the ground below. A hum escaped Ryuk's lips as he looked down at the figure, who also happened to be staring straight at him. A human? He thought, eyeing the short golden-haired young man who appeared to be about 19, around Ryuk's height. What drew Ryuk's attention the most, however, were his pupils. They weren't the usual circular shape. Instead, they bore the image of a heavy sword, flashing in and out with a golden light. I am Arthur. The young man's lips moved, and Ryuk heard the words clearly. He must be the most talented human among the newcomers. Ryuk, he responded. His lips also moved in response before he finally turned the knob and stepped into the room. How interesting. Are you really a pure human, Ryuk, or an hybrid? The thought echoed through the mind of Arthur, who stared at Ryuk's disappearing figure. In Arthur's eyes wasn't flesh, but a figure whose body parts was divided into two areas. The right side of his body, oozing with pitch-black flames, and the other part rippling with a blue wave, which was the same one Arthur himself he was also oozing with. Really interesting. When Ryuk stepped into his dorm room, the first thing he noticed was the formerly broken window, now fully repaired. The previous claw marks covering the flooring were gone, and the sofas had been properly arranged back in their original positions. Slam! The sound of the door shutting rang out as Ryuk turned his head to the side. Patootie stood there, faint beads of sweat dripping down her forehead. That was when it occurred to him. While the academy might have helped fix his broken glass and torn-up floor, it was still left to Patootie to rearrange the furniture and clean everything until it sparkled. He hadn't expected that. Seeing her sweaty face made him feel a twinge of guilt. "You're back," Patootie said, her ears flickering when she spotted him. Ryuk nodded. "Sorry you had to clean up the mess I made. Cleaning up is my job. There's no need to feel sorry. I'm glad to help if anything," she replied before moving back to her work. Ryuk nodded once more, then turned toward his room. Drying, drying, drying. The sudden ringing of his watch made him pause. Glancing down, he saw a notification flashing on its surface. Next class confirmed. Combat class begins in 1 hour. Personal message from the instructor. Prepare well for pain. That's a weird message, Ryuk muttered. Instead of heading into his room, he changed direction and exited his dorm. If the instructor was already sending threats, it was better to arrive early than late. As he walked, he reached out mentally. "Hey, where are you, Isha?" Silence stretched for a moment before a reply came. "Moving to the next class." "You in trouble?" Ryuk furrowed his brows. "I should be the one asking that." Isha snickered. "Well, you shouldn't. Because you don't seem to have quite the best reputation with the students. They either don't care or outright dislike you. Meeting close to 250 of them taught me that much, at least. That's almost half of the students talked to in less than an hour time frame. That's so impressive." Ryuk's tone dripped with mockery. "Also," Isha continued, "I've seen some vampire and dog guy stalking me, eyeing me weirdly. You know them?" Ryuk's expression darkened. "I do, and they're not friends. They're enemies. Stay away from them. They aren't particularly close to me, just watching, almost like they're trying to gauge my strength, and failing pretty badly at that. I'm with the Nagas anyway. They all seem to be heading to some particular location. Something called a battle class or whatever. Saw the message on the watches." "Wait, you can read?" Ryuk asked, frowning. And then, something else struck him, her tone. Isha was talking faster now, her words sharper, more direct. It wasn't like before when she barely spoke, her voice tiny and hesitant. Now, her speech was clear, almost commanding, even though the usual femininity in them remained. The difference was wild. "Seraphis taught me," Isha replied, and an image of that Naga's girl flashed through Ryuk's mind. Her aura seemed refined, and she honestly felt like someone who wouldn't be a threat. But then, he recalled Morgaine's words about the Nagas being a cunning race. His trust in her and her race was thin at best. You seem to be getting pretty cozy with the Nagas, Ryuk remarked. Isha snickered. I'm a royal of their race. They're treating me quite well. Just don't put too much trust in them. Okay? A pause. What is trust? She suddenly asked. Ryuk raised an eyebrow. You're better off not knowing. He continued walking, nearing the battle area. I should warn you. What? The instructor for the combat class. He's not like Instructor Catherine. In fact, he has a scar running down his left eye, and I'm guessing that came from some sadistic beast. I don't know how he'll treat you if he sees you. Isha let out a snicker. So, you're saying he's racist, huh? Who taught you that word? Seraphis. She said those who ignore their mightiness are just being racist. Pretty sure that's not a thing. I can always get back into the pet world anytime. Ryuk, don't sweat it. Ryuk hummed in response, then fell silent. He didn't like Isha leaving his side at all. The thought of her being outside the pet world made him uneasy. But he also knew he couldn't just keep restricting her. His excuse of her being weak and needing his protection was no longer valid. His belief that she wasn't wise enough to communicate properly with others was irrelevant now. She was learning too fast. She was more than capable of standing on her own. And if he kept trying to control her, it might just lead to headaches and trust issues. Isha wouldn't see his concern. She would only see a cage. It was time for her to see the world through her own eyes and learn her own lessons. One day, she would understand why he preferred keeping his circle small and his secrets locked tight. But still, hey system, what's Isha's true level of power? Right now, host's pet should be at the initial plane of dominion. By the system's estimate, she is more than 3 times stronger than the host and any newcomer in the area. Ryuk exhaled. Knowing Isha was strong enough to handle herself should have given him peace of mind. Yet somehow, why do I feel somber? Is it because I think I've fallen too far behind her? He mused to himself. It was a feeling Ryuk had gotten after his little skirmish with Isha. Even though he had been able to keep the situation under control in the end, his mood had somehow changed after the fight. I need to keep growing too. I can't let Isha leave me too far behind. Ryuk stated to himself, and that was when the golden panel flashed before his face. Main quest activated. Accept Mad White's first training and enter into the portal. Rewards. All possessed skills leveled up to level 10. Plus 7 level-up cards. Plus 15,000 purchase points. This is still active? Ryuk asked with a raised eyebrow as he looked at the panel, but his eyes dimmed. No. This is suicide. It didn't take long for Ryuk to appear before the combat class venue. And just like the previous day, he could sense the strange vortex. However, this time he didn't wait and directly stepped through it. When his foot touched the ground, the area had changed. It wasn't the former green, grassy plains of before. No. This time it was a snow-covered world, and around Ryuk was a large wall that encircled them, held by a large gate at the front, currently closed. It was almost as if they were trapped within the grounds. Around him were the various other students, all wearing the same mystified expressions. Ryuk unconsciously opened his lips, and frost escaped them. The temperature is terrible, he thought to himself, turning to the side and soon finding Isha along with the Nagas. He then turned his gaze around the place, hoping to find Instructor Dravik, but he was nowhere to be seen. Still, it wasn't yet time for the class to begin, and some students could be seen joining them as time passed by. Quickly, 20 minutes passed, and finally, the number of students reached a total of 500, completing the group. The lesson for today will be simple. A voice suddenly rang out as everyone turned their attention to the man who spoke. They found him to be none other than Instructor Dravik Kane, who was now standing before the large gate. The man slowly stretched his burly arms out before grabbing the gate's door knobs, 2 large, circular iron rods, before pulling them inside him. Turning his head to the side, a sinister grin appeared on his face as his lips moved, and his words rang out clearly. Survive! he said before fading into thin air. Now, there was nothing but the students holding confused expressions and the wide-opened gate, which revealed a world covered in fog, blocking the view. But soon, some of the students began noticing signs as Ryuk turned his eyes to his arms and watched the hair on them rising up. "There's something coming." He mused quietly, but the words were carried by the air, ringing clearly through the ears of every student, who now focused all their attention on the open gate. They didn't have to wait long. Thump, thump, thump. The ground beneath them began trembling, as if something incredibly heavy was advancing from within the fog. The students narrowed their eyes at the fog, wondering what it was. But then a horrific scream of disbelief rang through the air as they turned their attention to a top 10 genius of the avian race, whose hawk-like eyes flashed in shock, various runic lines dancing on his skin. That's a colossal," he screamed in horror. Instantly, a student erupted forth with incredible speed toward the gate, appearing before it in less than 3 seconds and shutting it tight. It was the #1 genius of the newcomers, Eren Giantkin. "We can't defeat a colossal. The only thing we can do is hold the gate and prevent it from entering," he shouted to the others. The students all instantly rushed forward, placing their hands on the gate. But then, a heavy bang resonated from outside, and about 100 of the students who had placed their hands on the gate were sent flying off it, slamming straight into the wall behind them, instantly knocked out. "Damn!" Ryuk thought in horror, veins instantly bulging in his arms as he struggled. But then, another heavy bang resonated as the object slammed into the gate, sending another 100 students flying away, rolling off into the snow. They quickly picked themselves up and tried holding the gate again, only for another group of students to be sent flying off once more, coughing up blood from the incredible force as they collided with incoming students, further knocking them down. "A world of pain will be the only thing awaiting you if that creature enters. Ha ha ha." Instructor Dravik Kane's evil laughter rang out from above as the remaining students holding the gate gritted their teeth, veins over their arms showing how much energy they were all putting in. But then, it wasn't enough. A strike that was about twice as strong as the previous ones rippled out, sending most of the geniuses still holding the gate flying off, leaving only 8 students standing. But that soon became 4 as another 4 students were sent flying off from the next attack, rolling in the snow with bloodied arms. Ryuk had a line of veins pulsing through the side of his face as he used all of his power, trying to hold the gate back. But he could see his own arms vibrating intensely, definitely unable to hold out for much longer. He couldn't help but have his eyes catch the image of Isha, who stood far away, her claws rubbing her chin with an intriguing look as she looked at him. "Hey, Isha, wanna help out?" Ryuk communicated to Isha, who looked at him, but then faded away from where she stood. Nah, I'm good." Isha's voice rang in his head, coming directly from the pet world. Ryuk clicked his tongue in dissatisfaction. But then, he suddenly noticed the rumbling quieting down as the sounds of footsteps withdrew further. "It retreated?" he asked himself in surprise. But then the realization dawned on him as he unconsciously stared at the person behind him, Eren, who also coincidentally happened to be staring at him with the same disbelieving expression. "Damn!" Both of them spat out at the same time as they rushed away from the gate, but they were still too slow. A heavy force slammed into the gate, and all of the remaining students still resisting were sent flying away. Ryuk felt the gate slam straight into his back, causing the world to blur around him. Before he knew it, he slammed into the wall behind him. "Ergeg!" A groan of pain escaped Ryuk's lips from the impact, but horror filled his face when he felt a large, 3-meter-tall body soar toward him and smash its head straight into his chest, causing his eyes to bulge. Blelir Girk. Blood splashed out of Ryuk's lips as thick crimson veins appeared in his eyes. It was like a mountain had knocked straight into him, but he had no time to even think about it before. Ruoir. Sonic shockwaves boomed through the enclosed space as a gargantuan humanoid figure stepped forward through the gate, powerful ripples radiating outward toward the students, whose faces were covered in horror as they looked up at the enormous being standing 15 meters in pure height. It seemed to be an incarnation of pure squirming muscle, dangling thick chains over its wrists and neck. But now, it had been unleashed, and the colossal's red eyes turned to the students. With an ear-splitting roar, it slammed its gigantic palm towards some of the students still lying on the ground, their eyes unable to believe the scene unfolding before them. The attack was so fast it left no chance for the students to react at all. Just when it seemed the 7 unlucky students below the Titan's palm would be reduced to paste, Ryuk felt the figure on his body, suddenly piercing through the air with speed. It appeared beneath the falling colossal's palm, and instantly, both of his hands slapped upwards toward it, palm meeting palm. Klai, boom, boom. An incredibly destructive shockwave rippled outward from the point of collision, enough to knock some of the geniuses off their feet. The floor beneath Aaron's feet shattered into pieces, his feet digging into the ground as a line of blood leaked from his lips. His muscles were stretched so much, his uniform ripped apart from pure muscle, yet to Aaron, even with his otherworldly strength, he still felt like he was bearing the weight of the world on his shoulders. "Get up!" Aaron screamed in anger. The geniuses who were still lying below him instantly flared away from the place. With a step to the side, he deflected the colossal's gigantic palm to the side, causing it to slam into the ground, carving out a handprint in the earth, a depth of 2 meters from its power. "We fight!" Aaron roared out as intense crimson light burst from his body. And then, crackle, crackle. Ryuk turned his head in shock as he saw a golden cloud crackling with golden lightning suddenly appear in the sky. And then, boom, boom. A pillar of lightning pierced straight down towards Aaron's figure, slamming into him with incredible power, followed by a roar that shook the hearts of most of the students. Intense smoke spewed forth from the point of collision, and when the students returned their gaze to Aaron, he had changed. From his previous 3 meters in height, his body size had risen exponentially to an impressive 10 meters, covered in bulging muscles. But with a 15-meter colossal before him, it made him look like a child. "Roar!" The colossal delivered an angered roar as its eyes instantly met with that of Aaron's, and it surged forward with a beastly rage, the ground tremoring with every step. Instantly, raw fist force smashed against Aaron's fist as he and the colossal collided, their power enough to make the air shudder and shockwaves ripple forth with terrifying force. But the result was soon clear. Aaron was sent stumbling back 7 steps, his back scraping against the gigantic wall that enclosed them, creating deep cracks across its surface from the power of the attack. Meanwhile, the colossal only took 3 steps backward before continuously speeding forward toward Aaron's flailing figure, its massive fist slamming toward his head. "Go away!" Before the fist could smash into Aaron's head, a gargantuan claw of pure steel, each 1.5 meters in length, clashed into the fist. A figure covered in steel-like fur with glowing crimson eyes appeared from the mist, slashing fiercely against the colossal's blow. The intense power was enough to make flames burst from the friction, as the colossal was knocked further back. The figure appeared out from the collision, his body smashing into the snow a couple of times before his huge claw dug into the ground, sparking Fam's formte horrifying friction amidst the snowy ground, before he came to a stop. It was a humanoid wolf of 3 meters in height, with steel-like and pointed dark fur, a set of flashing crimson eyes filled with ferocity, yet also tinged with surprise. "I lost," Fenrir growled, staring at his claw as it found crack marks all over it. He had lost even after activating his werewolf form. The colossal's fist was leaking pitch-black blood. But then the student witnessed a sharp claw mark appear on its fist, and it began closing up as its shoulder and hand bones creaked, preparing for another fight. A huge grin spread across its face as its eyes locked onto the students below it, and murderous pressure began seeping into the atmosphere. The thickness of the pressure and the smell of blood filled the air, so powerful that some of the geniuses were actually knocked unconscious. About 200 were brought to their knees, clutching their throats as they coughed uncontrollably. Only about 15 geniuses remained standing after the release of this murderous aura, and the Colossal was beginning to resume its march toward the students. That's a Colossal at the peak of the Plane of Dominion stage, the avian race experts, who had seen the Colossal up close, said in fear. Taking a couple of fearful steps backward, he tried to soar up into the air and leave the enclosed space, only for his head to slam into a golden light barrier in the sky, instantly sending him flying back down to the ground with 3 times as much speed as he had moved up. There's a barrier at the top. No, a barrier covers the entire area, making this place no different from a dome. We can't escape. The thought flashed in Ryuk's head as he felt the tremor beneath his feet endlessly magnifying. But then, a notification flashed. New quest issued. Survive the attack of a Colossal. Rewards. 1. +2 level up card. 2. +4,000 EXP. Survive. Now this is getting interesting. Ryuk mused to himself as he finally stepped out of the crack. He had initially thought it would be wiser to watch the various geniuses go all out while facing the attacks, giving him the chance to observe their power and racial abilities. But now, with such a quest from the system asking him to survive, it most likely wouldn't be a good idea to fight the Titan all alone. So, he made up his mind. He would join the remaining students still on their feet and work together to wear down the Colossal, rather than waiting for the Titan to finish them off and then battling it alone in the end. Ryuk wasn't the only one with this thought. The remaining geniuses, still standing, began advancing toward the Colossal, who marched toward them with unparalleled murderous aura. If there's a chance of surviving this, then it's obvious we have to fight as a team, no? Sanguine's voice rang out, but then a fur-covered body brushed past him, colliding against his shoulder roughly as Fenrir stepped forward. Just don't stand in my way, bloodsucker. Fenrir growled before rushing forward, his figure fading into the distance. CLANNG. Boom! A heavy explosion of metal echoed out from the distance, followed by fiery foams, and a path was soon carved as a figure was sent flying backward. The path cleared enough for the figure to slam into the wall of the arena, skidding down it. A fist-shaped imprint appeared over his chest, blood flowing from his battered body. It was none other than Fenrir, who had run out boldly just a few seconds ago, now seemingly unable to lift his head. Well, I guess that answers my question, Sanguine said, not too surprised, but taken aback by the rushing footsteps of the Colossal. A punch rocketed toward them all, its pure size enough to cast a shadow over them. Almost instantly, all the remaining geniuses scattered away, avoiding the attack, as the Colossal's blow smashed into the ground, carving an incredibly deep trench. But just as fast as it swung, the Colossal withdrew its arm, slamming it into another group of geniuses who shot to the side in a panic. Immediately, a shield of white energy erupted in the path of the Colossal's attack, but it crumpled before them, slamming through the energy barrier and sending the geniuses flying into the ground, crashing against the wall, knocked out. The Colossal advanced, smashing down another devastating fist blow and end them for good. But then, a golden hand suddenly appeared in the path of its punch. The two hands collided, the impact creating shockwaves, but neither of them stepped back an inch. The figure was none other than Morgaine, whose golden hair shimmered with an incredible golden energy. Steam escaped from the Colossal's lips as it instantly pulled back its fist, preparing to slam out another kick. But Morgaine faded away from where she stood, appearing beneath its jaw. Clenching her fist, golden veins crackled along her arm, and then she threw an uppercut, slamming into the Colossal's jaw, lifting its head upward as black blood poured from its lips. Ba-ong! A second punch came down as Morgaine drove her left fist toward the Titan's head, slamming it into its forehead. The Colossal's enormous body recoiled from the impact, but its both palms opened wide and suddenly clapped with incredible speed, aiming for Morgaine's figure. The air around their collision whirled with destructive energy. Boom! The entire space rippled violently from the impact as the Colossal pulled its hand back, opening its palm. But there was no blood paste, and with irritation it turned its head to the side where a snow-haired figure was standing, with Morgaine in his arms in a princess carry. "Oh, Ryuk, my hero," Morgaine muttered weakly and coquettishly, but then, thump, she was dropped unceremoniously onto the ground, her head slamming against it as Ryuk stepped right over her and continued toward the colossal. You dickhead, Morgaine roared behind him, but Ryuk paid her no attention as the colossal gave an incredibly loud roar, sending Ryuk's clothes flapping wildly around him. The colossal surged toward him, but just before it could reach him, Ryuk turned his gaze to Eren, who instantly moved, appearing before the Titan. Eren stopped the colossal dead in its tracks as their palms clashed. The ground trembled as the two giants locked in a battle of strength. The Titan guy is the only one with enough power to brawl with the colossal. The name is Eren. Eren's deep, guttural roar boomed in Ryuk's head, causing him to wince slightly. But then he continued, his voice ringing loudly through the entire arena. Eren, you will be our main attacker. Naturally, the colossal has much more strength than you, so don't go fist fighting it. Just try to hold it off and lock down its movements as much as you can. Your form is more than enough for that, Ryuk said before turning to address the others. With Eren locking down the Titan's movements, all the rest of you need to do is make sure Eren doesn't get overwhelmed. That means wearing it down as much as you can with your various abilities. Unless you use your strongest attacks, it won't even make a dent in the colossal muscular skin. So please, go all out with your strength or just stay out of the fight. If Eren can hold the Titan back, you'll all be safe from its mindless barrage. But Eren can only do that if the colossal is constantly distracted by your attacks. So, you all get the logic, don't you? Ryuk asked, with the students replying with furrowed eyebrows. With Eren holding the Titan and we all attacking it from left and right, it's only a matter of time for its endurance to wear out, and it will drop to the ground, dead tired. Or, even better, the distraction can give one of us a chance to use a sure kill attack and finish it off completely. Either way, we win this battle and survive. You all get the plan? Ryuk's idea rang out through the heads of every single genius in the area, and of course, none of them could say they didn't hear what he said. Looking at Eren, who truly seemed capable of holding the Titan, even though he was currently also taking the beating of his life, it occurred to them that maybe, just maybe, they could really take on the colossal. I can get us a sure attack that'll kill the Titan, but I'll need 5 minutes of uninterrupted time to charge it up. A voice rang out from Ryuk's left as he nodded his head, before crouching to the ground, a small radius around him being rid of dust by a sudden strange pulse beneath his feet. It's a deal then. We'll stall the colossal for 5 minutes, and you give the finish kill. Let's move, he said, and instantly, the ground beneath him caved in as he shot forward with speed, appearing in the sky before the colossal. A gigantic scythe appeared in his hands, which he swung down with speed towards its face. The Titan was able to sense the scythe instantly, slapping back the left of his hand toward Ryuk, but surprise clouded its face as the scythe cut through its hard skin, slicing a few centimeters deep before it was instantly sent flying off, though not with Ryuk, who had already sidestepped the backhand slap and was now falling freely towards the Titan's colossal eyes. Raising his hands first over his head, a gigantic ice sword began forming, reaching close to 3 meters in pure height, and Ryuk grabbed the hilt before piercing down towards one of the colossal's right eyes. The colossal reacted fast, covering one of its eyes, and the sword pierced down at its closed eyelid, surprisingly ripping through it like tofu and digging deep. A painful roar surged out from the colossal's lips, the sonic boom reverberating towards Ryuk, who quickly jumped over, avoiding the overwhelming hit and stretching his hands to the side. His scythe, which had been sent flying off, curved in the air, flying toward his palm, and he clenched it, once again striking downwards toward the colossal's hand that was reaching to remove the embedded ice sword, knocking it back. But then a sudden jerk occurred. The colossal's neck elongated with speed, and its head smashed into Ryuk's body, who could only place his scythe before him. Instantly, his body sped downwards towards the ground with speed, only to land on the back of a creature, which softened his fall, but then also faded away the second he gently landed onto the snow. Thank you, Isha. Ryuk called before his body became a blur once more, advancing towards the colossal. But with his second advance, he was not rushing alone. A class of students who were still standing rushed after him, their figures soaring into the air, and various attacks bashed down towards the colossal from left and right. Hot flames, winds of blades, gigantic blood crystals, blood beams, entangling roots. With the various students, even the only aim of simply making sure to cause as much nuisance to the colossal as possible and it being held down by Eren. Their ability to cooperate in their attacks naturally flowed out, as easily as a spiral, and their fear of being smashed down with a slap lowered greatly, with Eren also going absolutely all out in reducing the Titan's movement, even though injuries were also appearing left and right on his body. Being the one responsible for holding the Titan, but its gigantic size almost made the injuries seem like nothing his body wouldn't handle. Quickly, the battle, initially one of absolute dominance to the colossal and fear to the students, had changed in a blink, occasional roars of pain leaving the colossal's maw as it frantically tried to block the attacks. But with sudden movements, it was also failing repeatedly, being held down, unable to counter with its attacks. It eventually tried to adapt, and with a loud roar, ignored all the attacks coming its way and grabbed Eren's waist with his arm, trying to lift him up and slam him onto the ground. But then, RIP. A gigantic claw ripped apart a large chunk of its hand, causing dark blood to spray out of the wound, followed by another painful roar. As the colossal's red, I turned to look at the figure who was becoming a blur around him. "You forgot me?" Fenrir's beastly roar echoed out as his gigantic werewolf form slammed into the beast's shoulder, ripping apart flesh after flesh with its gruesome claw, and now, instead of fighting head-on, he had learned, and instead, running around the colossal's body on all fours, carving out as much flesh as possible. Their plans to stall the colossal were working perfectly, with wounds after wounds spreading around the colossal's body as time passed rapidly until an ultra-powerful roar boomed out as the colossal suddenly began shrinking its body, its muscles seemingly strained down and tense. From a 7-meter shrunk form, it suddenly bursted out at once to a full 20-meter height. The explosion from its shrinking and suddenly expanding body was so powerful that the majority of the students in the air were blown away instantly, caught by debris and knocked unconscious, and even the top 10 could barely stand as they were also sent flying down, including Eren, who just happened to be the closest. Boom, boom, boom. The floor shook heavily as the now 20-meter-tall Titan advanced forward towards the students in the enclosed space, sending an excruciating fist smashing toward them. But then it never reached as a snow-white figure appeared in the path of the fists, his own fist slamming forward too. Boom! The attack sent shockwaves rippling out, and Ryuk staggered back as veins on his right hand surged up. But then the Titan flashed forward, raising a leg and stomping hard on him, as Ryuk's two hands instantly advanced forth, meeting the Titan's feet dead-on. Their attack crashed against each other, sending debris spreading beneath the ground as Ryuk cried out. His feet locked under the ground and shattered continuously, his body screaming, "Damn! I'm getting crushed," Ryuk thought, though the pain as the Titan diverted its attention from the students into him, the one he hated the most. Unfortunately, the diversion would be short-lived, as Ryuk managed to resist for another 30 seconds, allowing a skill to suddenly bloom to life by the side of the battlefield. Wrath of Excalibur. The call resounded through the entire area as Ryuk felt a powerful surge of energy bloom not far from where he stood. One incredibly potent, so much so that he felt his heartbeat increase by the thousands, and that same sensation didn't occur to him alone. It struck the colossal as well. Its massive feet, which had been pressing down on Ryuk, instantly froze in place as its snapped gaze shifted toward the source of the energy. That brief lapse in its concentration gave Ryuk just enough time to shift his form beneath its weight, narrowly avoiding being crushed. Only now, safe at last, did he dare to turn his gaze toward the origin of the energy. It came from none other than a golden-haired human. He stood firm, gripping a large sword embedded in the ground, his arms resting on its hilt. Golden sword-shaped images flashed within his eyes, interlocked with intricate runes that pulsed in perfect harmony. Vroom! An intense burst of golden energy erupted from the young man's body, spiraling into the sky. Every student in the vicinity watched in awe as a gigantic phantom appeared behind him. A warrior clad in radiant golden armor, formed entirely of energy, towering at 30 meters in the air, standing even taller than the colossal itself. The beast, sensing an overwhelming threat of death, let out an earth-shaking roar and lunged forward at the golden-haired boy. But it was too late. The young man lifted his sword from the ground and raised it high into the air. In perfect synergy, the phantom warrior behind him mirrored the movement, its enormous luminous blade rising toward the heavens. And then Arthur called out, "Stab of the Pendragon!" In the next instant, he stabbed his sword down into the earth. The golden phantom did the same, driving its colossal blade toward the advancing colossal. Like a knife slicing through butter, the phantom's sword instantly solidified, piercing straight through it from the top of its head. The colossal attempted to resist, slamming its massive hands toward the attack. But it was futile. The golden blade ripped straight through its limbs, slamming into its skull, then tearing down through its entire body. It cleaved the creature cleanly in two, the blade lodging itself deep into the earth as the colossal's now severed halves collapsed onto the ground with thunderous impact. A flood of dark blood surged across the battlefield, painting the land in its wake. Arthur felt his strength draining away as he watched the colossal's body split in two. His sword vanished into thin air, and just as his body began to fall, his knees giving out beneath him, before he could even touch the ground, he was pulled into a firm grasp. Then, in an instant, his rescuer leapt away, clinging onto the wall, evading the waves of dark blood spreading beneath them. Arthur's weary eyes fluttered open, locking onto a pair of dual-colored red and blue irises staring down at him. "It's you," he muttered. Ryuk's narrowed gaze remained steady as he observed the blood trickling from Arthur's lips. "Talk no more. You're too injured," he stated, his voice calm yet firm. Arthur's vision blurred, and soon, his consciousness faded, his body going limp in Ryuk's arms. Clap, clap, clap. The sound of slow, deliberate clapping suddenly rang through the now bloody ground. The various students turned their heads skyward, finding none other than Instructor Kane gently descending onto the blood-soaked ground. His eyes lingered on the severed remains of the colossal before he took a single step forward, then vanished, only to reappear before Ryuk in an instant. Without a word, he reached out, took Arthur's unconscious body from Ryuk's grasp, and slung him over his shoulder. "You have all managed to survive," he declared. "Thus, the class is over." The students barely had time to breathe a sigh of relief before his next words came. "Your homework. In the next class, each of you will be required to explain how you managed to defeat a colossal titan at the peak stage of the Plane of Dominion, just as you did today. So go home. Think deeply. Until next time." With that, Instructor Kane turned, stepping into a swirling vortex that had appeared before him. And just like that, he was gone. The vortex remained in place, waiting. No one moved for a long moment. Even Ryuk, who had endured the fight to the very end, felt his legs finally give way. His back slammed against the wall as he slumped down, stretching his legs out in front of him. His heart pounded heavily within his chest. Endurance, 10. Mana, 0. The systems panel flashed before his eyes as he silently heaved for breath. He wasn't the only one. Every genius in the battlefield, especially the top 10, had collapsed onto their backs, gasping for air in exhaustion. Congratulations. Host has completed the main quest. Survive a colossal. Rewards obtained. Plus 2 level-up cards. Plus 4,000 EXP. The geniuses were beginning to leave. And just as Ryuk regained a bit of his breath, he opened his eyes to find someone standing before him. A half-naked figure, his skin riddled with red marks, stretched out a hand toward him. It was none other than Eren. Despite the clear signs of battle upon his body, Eren stood with ease, as if he hadn't taken any damage at all. I wasn't able to introduce myself properly before, Eren said with a grin. I am Eren Giantkin. Ryuk took his hand, and with one swift jerk he was pulled to his feet. Ryuk, he replied. But suddenly, dry thing. The sound of their apex watches vibrating violently echoed through the air. They both glanced down at their wrists, finding a new notification flashing before them. You have been rewarded with 1,350 apex points. Ryuk's gaze shifted toward Eren's watch, catching sight of his notification. You have been rewarded with 1,300 apex points. Eren smirked. Seems like the Academy values brains more than brawn. He chuckled, his laughter ringing loudly. Ryuk let out a small chuckle of his own. And then, without another word, the two of them stepped into the portal, soon followed by the rest of the students. The combat class had ended. Without a doubt, it had been the most hellish class of their lives. A class where most of them never believed they would survive. Yet here they were,